not true. So sociology became quite fractured, very diverse in some way. So some people like coming from Taiwan would kind of continue to find these people in places like Minnesota, Wisconsin, or wherever. So that's why you have this illusion that things are not like that. But with the encroaching globalization of the university, I think it's going to get even worse. So, yeah, that's messed up. But again, there are always exceptions, but by and large, right? The great social theory scientists, I keep on saying, who are not university professors. Of course, we teach them. But that's after they're dead. There's a very, very interesting study someone did, and it was a comparison of two psychologists. And according to this researcher, at least, one person was kind of a typical university professor of the period of time. He tried to have many students, was very authoritarian, right, and tried to make everyone scientific. The other didn't have many students, was much more liberal, and just did this research. So if you look at their citation count, when they were alive, the authoritarian one had bombed citations. He was the famous scholar. He got all the prizes, became a member of all the important honorary associations. The other guy just didn't win no prizes, no associations. After they died, it goes like this. Once the authoritarian guy dies, no one cites him. They cited him because he was part of it. The researcher who was just doing his thing because he produced good psychology, I guess, kept them being cited. But it's a bit like that. So university is kind of a place, it's kind of full of power injuries, and a lot of people spend a lot of time not doing research, but trying to accrue power. That's the game. So once you get tenure, what do? You have nothing else to do. So you try to become like president of National Association, you try, you do all sorts of things. And so you become mini politicians. You think those people are going to change the world? I don't think so. Unless a progressive person becomes prime minister, maybe he or she can work for him or her. Sorry, I mean very cynical.
Yes. I guess it's the same question, so I guess the shorter form and the longer form. The shorter one would be, you usually cast nationalism or like ethnocentrism in a very bad light, but is it really that bad? And the longer question would be, because you talk about how this globalized educational system reproduce these elites that are detached from the local reality. So especially if they're in poli-sci or sociology, usually they will not, they later on probably won't be able to contribute to, for example, Chinese society because they've been trained in some way, right? So in this case, could some part of nationalistic ideas be able to correct this trend, do something about it?
Yeah, no, yes, thank you for your question. I'll answer the second question first, because it's actually easier to answer. Basically, I just think there's a lot of analogy between university and like financial companies or corporations, McDonald's. It's essentially like this, right? You have this hierarchy. But once, if you're a Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, or McDonald's, it doesn't matter, Subway, it doesn't really matter.
create this universal thing. So they create global units. But one of the reasons they all know is this kind of universal knowledge is actually not complete. They need particular knowledge. Which is yet another reason they always try to hire people from many, many different places. So they want a Japanese person. Why? Because she or he will speak Japanese, of course, but she or he will have at least some common sense about what Japan is. I mean, if you just kind of all white Americans who knew nothing about India, you know, maybe they'll say that's a great place to open McDonald's in India because there are 1.1 billion people who are all hungry. Well, except that Hindus don't eat beef, really. It's probably not a very good idea. I mean, that's a stupid example, but that level of ignorance is very endemic in a lot of these countries. So they always try to hire locals, not just because they're the best and the brightest, but also because they provide some semblance of knowledge, local knowledge, which is at the level that almost anyone, if you grew up in Taiwan, you'll know certain things. For example, that in mainland China's, you know, maybe the new New Year isn't that important. It's the Lunar New Year that's more important. Yeah, so these are stupid examples. But is that kind of knowledge very substantive? No. Because it's essentially kind of applied knowledge which tries to apply universal things. Say, selling of hamburgers or selling of sandwiches to various local content. It's useful, but it doesn't really produce anything new. And certainly, as far as I'm concerned, you know, it would be terrible if these things really colonize Chinese food market. Much better food, for example. And this is the kind of thing that happens in Seoul, for example, right? You go to Seoul and, you know, very few people now eat traditional Korean food. They're actually very good. You know, all the Subways, they go to McDonald's, they eat Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they think they're more advanced. You know, just like I feel that Taiwanese, you know, you have these wonderful tea, you know, some of the best tea in the world. You know, you don't drink tea, you drink coffee. Because it's more advanced. You know, tea is your parents' drink. You know, coffee is for younger, more cosmopolitan, more advanced people. Anyway, something like that. But getting back to nationalism, national centrism, I mean, not always, because I'm kind of arguing against just kind of cosmopolitan universalism in terms of knowledge collection. Right? As I said, you can't be kind of an abstract universal person. I mean, this is obvious, say, in the field of literature. You can't do literature if you just know one language. It makes no sense. Right? I mean, I don't think you want to be a kind of Chinese scholar, you know, who read everything in translation and think that you understand everything about all the great, you know, new novels or something like that. But more importantly, you always need these concrete ideas, maybe ethnocentric in some way. But the trouble with this is that taking nationalism and ethnocentrism too seriously is that you get this wrong idea about almost everything from a very different perspective. Not just because of the point I keep mentioning, which is that nationalism itself is a modern Western idea, but that because you so misrecognize the past, right, that you actually end up misrecognizing the present as well. Meaning that you have absolutely no idea what's particular or universal about it. So I'll give you a very, very simple example. If you go to South Korea, for example, people shake their hands like this. I mean, it's not an important example. South Koreans think that this is only true in South Korea. This is a great
Well, it's actually the case that this is just a very common, and in fact, the model way of greeting people in Silk Road cultures. Right? So wherever there's a vibrant Silk Road culture left from centuries ago, everyone kind of does this in Mongolia, or even actually in Kazakhstan. Very interesting. What that means, though, is that you completely neglect the sources, say in this case, of contemporary South Korean culture, where these things come from. They don't actually come from inside. They actually come from outside. So what nationalist or ethnocentric perspective does is it leads you to systematically misunderstand the way of the cultural society. I mean, just give me a very simple example. So,
I'm curious about your opinion that if there is a possibility that the what you call the capitalist intellectual context, this kind of structure will be changed if today the dominant power of university education or university ideology is shifted from United States to the other country, maybe China or some country which is not believe this kind of ideology. It's possible.
it's possible, but I don't think it will happen. And for a very simple reason. Right? I mean, so let me give a very small example. So if you go to Germany today, and as I mentioned several times, social theory is really German in many ways. You know, a lot of the great works are written in German, and it was true for many, many decades. Do German sociologists read German? Well, of course they read German. Do they actually read German literature? Well, increasingly no. Why? They want to publish in SSCI. They're not German. Most people don't read German. It's an exotic language. So very often you see German people reading Marx, Weber, and so on in English translation. And it makes almost no sense. I mean, they're German. You know, they grew up in Germany, they speak German, they actually read perfectly. Why is that? Well, the reason is that the discussion on social theory is so profoundly shifted to the U.S. Everyone's citing the standard English translation. So whether you want to argue about interpretation or just cite them, that becomes the norm. So in that context, again, this is the kind of the flip side of ridiculousness. There's a very weird way in which in the global university, the range of reference has narrowed. And this is why, I mean, I think it's even more true in literature, actually. So you just read fewer and fewer people. Why? Because they become canonized. You can't be bothered trying to read 10 different theorists. You just want to read 2 or 3. Just like in great literature. You know, increasingly, there are fewer and fewer novelists we read. We're counting, others are completely forgotten. And even within those, what's interesting, especially in English literature or European literature, is people keep on reading shorter and shorter novels. So, my favorite example is 19th century English novel, right? So, you know, you have this great novelist, George Eliot. Well, easily, I mean, I think almost everyone will agree that her greatest novel is Middlemarch. Do people read Middlemarch? No, it's too long. So they read Silas Marner. Why? It's only 200 pages. You read Charles Dickens. He wrote many great novels. Right? David Copperfield, Great Expectations, I mean, Bleak House, Dombey and Son. Do they read them? No, it's too long. There's 600 pages. So they read Hard Times. Why? It's only 180 pages.
So there's a very funny way in which these canons get shaped. And I think it's also true in almost every field. I mean, so I'm sorry to go very far away from your question. But another thing this kind of globalized thing does is create this bizarre universal canon, but it's very thin. And in this context, because the only particulars are in these nationalists, very often don't make sense. We don't really actually have much choice. These kind of empty universals, abstract universals, or these kind of concrete particulars, neither of which actually does the job. Yes?
Mr. Lee, thank you for your expose. I come through the European system actually. I'd like to make a remark actually in two things. I may have misread
Yes.
in your PowerPoint, but I seem to remember that at one point you used the word Eurocentric,
Yes.
while you were actually explaining very much how European countries are importing and modeling themselves on the American model.
Yes.
And the emphasis also on publishing in English. So would it then, and in that sense, kind of steering away from the European tradition, would it in that sense then not be more accurate to speak not in terms of Eurocentric, but Anglo-centric?
Or American-centric.
Or American-centric, yeah, because this is what Madame, I mean, I'm doing my research as well. There is a Eurocentric perspective and there is also an Anglo-centric way.
Yes.
As I also I have to publish in English. Now, when you come to mention about Germany and the social science, I'm not German either, increasingly citing English, I totally agree there with you, because they need the citations in order to continue playing the game. But when you look underneath that, there is in a counter, it's maybe counter movement is a very strong word at this stage, but to somehow create a balance with this trend of universalism, which you have been very well explaining in this lecture, there is also this particularism in Germany too. And when you read the German, I mean, and there is German research coming out entirely written in Germany, and this is slowly, cycling is probably not a word, finding its way through younger researchers who have a command of the German language, are not necessarily German, teaching in European universities like in the Netherlands and Belgium and so on. By the way, I'm from Belgium, I graduated from Leuven, another dinosaur, but not Oxford, Cambridge. Using these German or even French theories and applications into their teaching methodology. So there is, as much as we are all, and especially very strong here, universalism, globalization, America, it doesn't stop. At the same time, in other languages, European languages, there is research being produced that those who are so fortunate to master not only English, because it has a big downside, everything is only in English, and that makes it, what we say, very thin, that we benefit from this research being created in European countries where the language is not only English, although English has a dominant position.
No, you are absolutely right. Yes, it's American-centrism, certainly by the fact of Global University, or Anglo-American, if you like. Yes, so I completely agree, and I should be more careful in specifying that. I completely agree with you at one level. I'm not sure. I mean, we're talking about, by the way, the university system, right? I'm not talking about the world at large. And certainly outside the university, the national language is much more important. And that's how knowledge is disseminated and so on. I mean, it's a bit like, I know I'm using a slightly skewed analogy, but it's like the art market. You know, there's an article in Financial Times recently which kind of illustrated this very well. You know, Amsterdam, for example, used to be one of the great centers for trading in European art. Not just Dutch art, but European art. But what this writer was saying was that in the last 10 years, this is no longer true. Why? Because all the great works that used to be traded in Amsterdam are now either in London or New York. And it's this kind of the super concentration. I think that's what's happening. So, just like in football, soccer, right? I mean, it's even more extreme than baseball because more countries, more people play football. Right? You know, do whatever the Barcelona team just Catalonians? No. Do they have Spanish? No. Just they're completely random. Well, they don't care. You want your team to win. And it's this mindset that's kind of fueling this global university. You want your university to win. Do you care where they're from? No. But they have to polish. Right? You don't care where they're from. They don't care if they're women or Martians. It doesn't matter. Maybe they're robots. It doesn't really matter. Maybe they're dogs. Right? Who knows? It doesn't matter. What matters is they publish in top journals. And that really circumscribes what you're talking about. Yes, like Marx, maybe in 30 years, they may disseminate, and I suspect there are people who are brilliant, who are really engaged, and have a very interesting perspective, whose insight will kind of galvanize and consolidate this kind of social movement, right? So give you a very simple example. You know, usually some of the most successful and important movements in the world, and certainly in the U.S. in the last 40 years, are things like women's feminism, lesbians and gays, right? Things like that. Disabled people, the rights of disabled people. So on out there, many of them. And then you try to see, and of course now in the U.S. and elsewhere, there's a lot of systematic research, sometimes even departments of programs, and they're journals, SSCI journals. So to participate in this, any universities create women's studies departments or something like that. Who knows what they're really thinking, but they don't care because you have SSCI journals, and you know, Stanford and Harvard has departments of this, so we should have up to, something like that. And it's all good in some way. But if you trace then who were the great theorists, so to speak, of these movements, who wrote books that people in the movements were inspired by, or consolidated their ideology, whatever. Well, were they written by university professors? Well, you know the answer. No. No, and I'm almost tempted to say never, but probably not never, but almost never. And the constraints 40 years ago, in some way, were, plus.
I'm sorry, I know it's late, but just to follow right up on that. But still, all right, so maybe the theorists of these movements were not university professors. But don't you think like the sunflower movement here in Taiwan, maybe while you were here, it seems like a lot of the participants came out of sociology departments, much like the NTU sociology department. Isn't there a sense in which universities, there's a leftish ideology that's across the board of universities, and there's a lot of support for these social movements?
Oh, well, no, of course. But, I mean, I was more talking about knowledge production. I'm sorry. Yeah, students, yes. Yeah. There's always hope. I mean, hope springs eternal in some way, right? Well, I don't mean to be facetious. Children of the future type thing. No, yes, you're absolutely right. Because university is, compared to high school, a place of unprecedented freedom. Yes, you can have influence. Because you're not trying to answer exam questions. Find the right answer to the entrance exam for the first one. Yes, they're liberal professors. Yes, I mean all sorts of things, right? Yes, there are people, interesting people, smart people, thinking people. Yes, you have the relative luxuries of being divorced from real life. You can read, you can do social movements. So yes, absolutely. But I was really talking about producing. So if it's supposed to be this wonderful place that's leading, that's the leading edge, right? That's leading the world. And certainly in engineering, it is leading the world. Many of the great innovations does happen. Machines, whatever. I'm not so sure about social sciences. Anyway, so Friday we'll continue. I'm not pessimistic. I'm just pessimistic about the university. That's different. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. No, that's a very good point. Thank you. Yeah. Is it here? Oh, I need to order something. Okay, thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Very nice to meet you. So you're a neighboring institution? So what do you teach? What's the theory? Well, interesting. Interesting theory. Have you been here for a while? Like it. Oh, really? What else? Oh, all for it. Yeah, I mean, well, well, it should be, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, yeah. Yes. I don't know how people go, but yeah.
Yeah, we go for that in the half of the people cancelled, but I'm getting tired of organizing.
盛明没有上课对不对？
There's nothing to do.
妙妙。